20, verses 1 through 16. And Jesus said, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. And he went out again about noon and about 3 o'clock, and he did the same. At 5 o'clock he went out, and he still found others standing around. And he said to them, 'Why are you standing here idle all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' He said, 'You also go into the vineyard.' And when evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his managers, 'Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first.' When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. And when the first came, they thought they were going to receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, 'These last only worked 1 hour, and you made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.' But he replied to one of them, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last.'" So, as you can probably tell, there's a little more to the story than the children's story. But the point is the generosity of the landowner, the generosity of the Lord. For us, the generosity and the grace of God. God chooses to give his love to all of us, no matter whether we come to him when we're 3 or 4 or 12 years old or 83. It doesn't matter. God loves all of us that much that no matter when we come to God, we are given that grace and that love of God. Now let's look back. Well, I'll tell you about the picture first. As I say, let's look back at the wilderness. How many of you have ever seen this picture? Haven't seen it? A few of you. I grew up with this picture on a wall in my house, so of course I think that everybody knows about this picture. Just an old man bowed in prayer over a piece of bread and a bowl of soup. It's one of those pictures that is usually put up sort of as a reminder for us to be thankful for our daily bread. But there is a story behind it that I've seen in a few places. I've never totally tried to verify it, but I have seen it in a few places. Supposedly in a town in northern Minnesota, part Swedish, an old homeless man knocked on the door of the home of a struggling artist and begged for food to eat. The man was about to sit down to a simple lunch of bread and soup, and he invited the old man to share. And as he was getting something from the refrigerator, he turned around and saw the old man bow his head in prayer and thanksgiving. And so he painted the scene because he was an artist. And that picture was just kind of set in his mind of thanksgiving, of gratefulness for the gift. And many of us have friends who are either homeless or almost homeless. Many of us have experienced it for a short time. Some people among our friends have been chronically homeless. Some of our members have been homeless. So even though not all of us have experienced that in a long way, we can get a little bit of an idea of what it's like to have like no money in your pocket and no roast in the freezer, and you don't know if you have enough money to get the gas to get home from your gig in Culver City. You know, that happens a lot. But honestly, it's difficult to imagine having to constantly live off the charity of others. constantly. Most of us are very, very, I don't know whether proud is the right word, but we're at least happy that we're able to pretty much support ourselves. Sometimes I get angry at the bills that I have, and then I decide I should be thankful instead that I've been able to somehow usually pay them, or at least be trusted to pay them, and make things happen. But if you can't go to the store and get food, if you can't buy gas to get to work, if you can't buy clothes or shoes to even get a job interview, it's pretty tough. So this man, this homeless old man, was exceedingly grateful for the simple meal. And some of our friends are exceedingly grateful for the help that they can get. Most of them try very hard. This isn't meant to be a sermon on homelessness or hunger. It's not. But it's one of those things about gratitude, and it's one of those things about receiving grace and generosity. And all of our scriptures kind of point that way today. In particular, the one about the vineyard. But I actually want to look at the one in Exodus, where people are in the wilderness. Been kind of a theme of ours for a year. But people are in the wilderness because they're traveling, they're searching for God, actually. They're being delivered from slavery. But they're grumbling because they used to have something really secure, even though they were enslaved to it. Their pots of meat from the Egyptians. And once they were freed from their slavery that they wanted to be freed from, and found out how tough it was to try to get through that wilderness without the guaranteed pot of meat from your taskmaster, they wanted to go back. You know, I've even heard of people wanting to go back into some sort of institutional living sometimes because it was secure versus being sort of out on your own and scared. So God makes an agreement. He says they're going to have meat at night, and they're going to have bread, all they can eat in the morning. All the bread they want in the morning, all the meat they want at night. I'm going to take care of them, and all they have to do is follow directions. All they have to do is keep their end of the bargain. I mean, we can sympathize with them. They were living in wealthy houses. Sometimes some of us say, well, what's wrong with that? The maid gets her own room, and she gets her food and her room and board, and why is she upset? You know, there are reasons. You know, no personal freedom or something. But then they don't, when they were free, the Israelites, they weren't so sure. There's only so much stuff they can carry out of Egypt. So once they eat up what they're carrying, once they wear out whatever clothes they had on their back, then they're kind of out of luck. So they have to kind of depend upon God. And maybe that's their lesson, to depend upon God and depend upon following the instructions from God. So he says they're going to gather what they need to eat. And then on the 6th day, they're going to have like twice as much as they need, as long as they do it that way. I will rain down bread from heaven for you. That's what God said. The people are to go out each day and gather enough for that day. In this way, I will test them and see if they follow my instructions. On the 6th day, they are to prepare what they bring in, and that is to be twice as much as they gather on the other days. So I thought, well, God was pretty good about that, you know. So, okay, they're complaining, I'm going to provide them with what they need. So, but why did he only give them 1 day's worth? How whack? You know, when I go to the market, I'm like, okay, I need a loaf of bread, but I need some bagels too, because the bread isn't going to last all week for both of us, and I really like bagels. And I should get 2 dozen eggs and an extra quart of milk, and I get way more than a day's worth of food. Now, of course, I have a refrigerator. You know, they didn't have one. And I'll admit, sometimes we get food, and it sits there, and then we don't eat it, and then we have to throw it away. Stupid. wasteful, but we're in the market, we think we want it. Why did God only give them one day's food at a time? Trust. Yeah, a little bit of a test. A little bit of a test of their faith. He was giving them a test by just giving them what they need each morning. Maybe to see if they learned their lesson. Teachers give tests all the time. I give tests. Usually quizzes, and usually on a limited amount of information. Right? Until the final. But by doing a little test, a day at a time, we're finding out if they've learned anything. God is seeing if the children of Israel are learning to trust Him. God is seeing if we are learning to trust Him. We will all be the first to admit here that sometimes we're on a real shoestring. Pet food bank. Shoestring, and then all of a sudden there's 400 pounds of food. Enough for that month's distribution. Seems like we're still being taught to trust that by following God's instructions, by following God's Spirit, we will have what we need. I'm being tested this weekend. Will I have what I need to pay those particular musicians I have to pay? Probably. Actually, it always works out. It's just always really scary. Always really scary. Now, are we always totally confident we're going to have what we need? Anybody ever have any doubts? Yeah, I do too. But I've never been let down, actually. I've been scared, been worried, never really been let down. Another reason, one day at a time. It's a sign of God's grace. Okay? So I really am organized. It's a test. We introduce the concept, and we find out it's for a test. Next thing, it's a sign of God's grace. Moses and Aaron said to them, "In the evening you will know it was the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the glory of the Lord because He has heard you grumbling against you. Who are we so you should grumble against us? You will know it was the Lord when He gives you meat to eat in the evening and all the bread you want in the morning." If you're grumbling not against us, but against God. And look at this. He's still giving you all these quails. Just go out and grab one, cook it, and eat it. Just pick up some bread that's come down from the sky and eat it. I always wanted to taste that stuff. I kind of like this because I like bread and I like to have all the bread I can eat. I thought, this would be really good. I'm trying to eat more protein in the mornings now. What does the manna from heaven show us about God, though, besides the test and the grace? The grace, it's free. But it's also a testament of God's faithfulness to the people of Israel and to us. For 40 years, He never missed a morning. When the dew lifted from the grass, there was the manna. For 40 years, people got up in the morning and grabbed some bread, just there for the taking, to eat. Of course, as usual, I have to have a little caveat here. I don't really know historically whether there was 40 years worth of dew on the morning with bread sitting there. But I do know that the needs were supplied in some way. Might have been grain that they could pick and eat and bake. I also know that the way these words are written for us is so that we can easily understand the provisions of God for us. I don't doubt that it would be possible for God to leave beautiful baked loaves of bread for me and grass in the morning. It happens a different way for me now. But it's a wonderful thing, that mercy, that grace, that faith, just for following God's instructions. And what are those instructions? Listen to God, share His grace, Share his love. Be good stewards of what you do have. Don't question God's generosity. If God is generous to me, I will not begrudge God being generous to you. And sometimes that's a little bit hard for us to imagine the breadth and width of that mercy of God, that someone who was so much worse than me about something should have equal standing with God. But our task is really to live out God's love, serve others, and live in a way that honors God and honors Christ. Take him to work, school, home. Let that grace transform your life and the lives of the people around you. Let's be ambassadors of God's grace. Amen.